come once again to discuss things.
Greetings and salutations, fine ladies and gentlemen of the wireless new digital age. I am Sid Partu. Joining me today is...
A geek for fun. Good morrow to you all. I hope your undercarriages are standing firm and true.
And welcome to another illustrious episode of Geeky Gentleman History Month. As always, I'm not going to remember to do that every time. So for our topic discussion to start off History Month with, we talked about archaeology. I'm actually not sure what episode order these are going to... No, topic will be before... Okay, it's all good. It's actually kind of funny because the character discussion that we're going to do today is partly to, help transition us out of Horror Month and stuff, but, it's also character whose history is kind of, wrapped up in archaeology. So since we just recorded that last night, I don't think there's going to be too much of a danger of repeating ourselves or anything, because all that should remain relatively fresh. But yeah, I wanted to talk about the mummy. Just in general, the idea of the mummy as a monster, it's obviously got roots in, like, this historical footing, though those roots are very vague and more just kind of Western hooga-booga-ness of like, oh, it's crazy over in Egypt with their cursed mummies and stuff, and it's like there's some roots to that in the actual legends and myths of the realm, but not a lot. It's mostly just a Western interpretation of things. And I don't know, I figured it'd be interesting. But like last week, for the last character discussion for Horror Month, we talked about zombies. And kind of what put the mummy in my head is someone on Twitter going, oh, mummies are just Egyptian zombies. And I'm like, no, it's not the same thing. It's really not. So Alfie, what's your opinion? What's your background? What's your hot take on the mummy? I asked you for a hot take, and I expect a hot, steaming take.
Well, as you know, Geek for Fun never knows when to not spit hot fire. So yeah, I'm going to throw a hot take right here that might stimulate the conversation a bit. Mummies are garbage.
Oh.
Mummies are like top contender for the worst horror villain. I really think mummies are just the worst. Like, they're just a notch above skeletons.
Ouch. Damn, that's harsh. Are you just doing that because I told you I demanded a hot take, or is that like honestly what you were planning to go into this conversation with?
Yeah, I never fib when it comes to my hottest opinions. I just genuinely feel like there's a lot of great background and myth to draw upon with the mummy, and how the Egyptians had such a fascination with the dead, and how they prepared them, and all of that. It definitely invites exploring the concept, and I think all of that part is interesting. I just feel that whenever we get the mummy itself, you're right, it's never quite a zombie, but I feel like there's so much more interesting aspects of Egyptian lore that should get higher focus rather than just the mummy itself, which seems to be like the main dominant thing for a good period there. Especially if you just terms about how many goddamn movies they made about just the mummy and sequels to that and then individual things and yada yada yada. It's like, give me fucking Anubis. Fuck the mummy.
Yeah, it's in The Mummy Returns. They do the Scorpion King origin bit, and like he calls upon the armies of Anubis to give him power, and like for just like it's like a 10 less than 10-second shot. You see like fucking dogmen soldiers with like the pharaoh crown kind of things, and they're wielding sickle swords and charging into battle, and it's the coolest looking shit.
Right? Instead we get really... bandages McGee.
Yeah, yeah. See, I guess I get where you're coming from. I'm actually a pretty big fan of the 99 Mummy movie, and to a lesser extent its sequel, Mummy Returns, and then we just don't talk about the Mummy Tomb of the Dragon Emperor because that movie didn't exist. But like I really like it in that movie, and I feel like it does a really good job of creating an argument for why the mummy is not just, you know, bandages wandering around, slow zombie-like. Because it's got like this mystical power element to it that's really cool. And so like that movie's got all the bells and whistles of like mystical curses, and it's a monster with rules, which I always think is really fun. Like some guys open a chest that gets them cursed by the mummy, and so even though they're not really something like part of his main goal, he's obligated to take care of them before he can really do the rest of what he wants to, which is kind of cool. And then to a lesser extent, there are ideas I find enjoyable in the 2017, I want to say it is, Tom Cruise movie. And it's mainly going off of a lot of the same things from the 99 film that I really like, where it's like, you know, the mummy in that has these mystical powers and control over things that are really cool, and like she can make zombies, which was kind of neat. So, you know, the idea that, oh, mummies are just zombies is like, well, no, she can make and control them, which was cool. So I like the mummy as a horror threat on that level, where it's like this cursed, mystical entity that is also an undead, you know? I think that's the cool approach for mummies. But as far as,
there
just
is
bandages walking around, yeah, you're right, it's about a step above skeletons.
That aspect is something which does give it, like, again, the extra reason to draw upon more like Egyptian mythology and more tools to play with. My argument for that is, so when we do go to that well, at what point does it stop becoming a mummy and then just the spirit of an ancient Egyptian pharaoh or something like that? Like, what do you classify the mummy as that, and then when you just get into general mysticism? Because for a lot of those films, you do get the bandages when it's in the sarcophagus and it comes out, but it's very much like this is its like first form. It's like incomplete stuff, and then it goes away very quickly. For me, I feel that's kind of, well, at that point you're not a mummy anymore, because that's the design, that's what it is. You rarely see someone use the mystical magical powers when they're in that incomplete form. It's never just an actual mummy design while still for the entire film, while it also has all of that. Normally they start looking more human and they get their old resort, and then they just basically become a ghost at that point.
No, and to be fair, that's definitely the case with both of the Brendan Fraser films. The Tom Cruise film, she stays, bandages and whatnot throughout the entirety of the film. She is mummified and all that stuff, and it's got like a cool look to it. Again, for all the problems the 2017 film has, there's like one just really dynamite scene in that where they've captured her and they're pumping her blood full of mercury because it's got like anti-magical properties or something, so it's going to cut her off from the ability to use magic. But she gets a last-ditch effort in and calls upon the power of the sands to strike out against her enemies. But they're in London, and there's not exactly, miles of sand dunes. But then all the glass in the city just shatters to dust, and it becomes, that famous thing of like the sandstorm that like forms her face and all that. And so like that scene was really really cool, and it's a total power move. I really really enjoyed that scene, if nothing else, I really wanted to like that movie, if you can't tell. I was very disappointed when that movie ended up sucking as hard as it did.
Ian wanted to reboot the Dark Universe.
I did. I mean, I really liked Dracula Untold. I was really excited for the Mummy movie. I thought the design for her was fantastic. And then Tom Cruise got a hold of it and just made it a fucking mess. So it's a disappointing thing, but so when I think of the Mummy as a villain, I think of, because I grew up on the 99 film and stuff, so I do think of like that really over-the-top action thing. And what's crazy is a lot of people really don't think of that. A lot of people, especially in the horror community, tend to like the Boris Karloff things, where it's just, he's just like trying to possess people most of the time so that he can get a new body for his long-lost love. At least that's what's going on in the first movie, and it's not particularly interesting. That one I did find, pretty damn boring, not gonna lie. So I don't know. I don't particularly care for that. I like me, I like big showy magic kind of things, and commanding the sands to attack your enemies is big showy magic, and that's cool.
Yeah, and I think that's a neat idea, because once you get into that type of magic, so much of what we see is very much like Merlin-esque magic. So it's like spells and potions and levitation and all of that. When you start getting to the Egyptian type of magic, you do really nice. You really get a different kind of vibe to things. That's why I like Dr. Fate quite a bit, and like the Yu-Gi-Oh manga and all of that. The mummies have that access of dealing with curses and dealing with like scarab beetles swarming massively and under your skin, and really horrifying, almost kind of body horror type of magic, and then weaponizing the desert itself, because again, you can't exactly say, oh, I can use my magic to cast fire or manipulate water. You're in Egypt. There's not a lot of that to work with, but there's a shit ton of sand, so being able to use sand creatively, I think, is a nice thing you can give them in like the diversifying what their moveset is. But at the same time, I feel like those are all things which you could do in, like, say, a movie about, an Egyptian god is summoned, or it uses its wrath on the populace, or again, the spirit of a pharaoh. I don't even think you need a mummy to go along with that. I think that has its own
at that point, if you're gonna do it, why not go with the name recognition? I guess would be my argument.
Is that the main thing? Do you think it's just the name?
Well, like, if you're going to go with,
we're
going to go with like an Egyptian spirit of an evil pharaoh, and it's come back to haunt because of a curse. I mean, like, wouldn't you be just a little disappointed that it's not, in some way, shape, or form tied into the mummy at that point? Like,
no, I'd be hyped.
At that point, like, why bother not having it be a mummy? If you're gonna have it be Egyptian, why not connect it to the mummy? I guess kind of what I come down to. But I don't want to talk just about the newer movies. I do kind of want to talk about like the general idea of like what created this myth, because both the Mummy and the Wolfman, more the Mummy, because werewolves at least have like actual, myths attached to them and stuff, even if there's no like one set story. Of the like Universal crew, you got Dracula, Frankenstein, Wolfman, the Mummy, and then Creature from the Black Lagoon tend to be like the big stars, right? So like the Mummy is that first one where there's like, there's myth and stuff wrapped into the idea of like, preserving the body and the idea of curses that that could make the dead rise. That's there, but it's not actually like a legend, you know? It is a very westernized thing that kind of just, like we were talking about in the archaeology episode, just kind of popped up because Egypt was just the in thing at that time, and it just kind of popularized itself through that means. And it's not like wholly without some justification. Famously, like everyone that uncovered the tomb of King Tut like died under mysterious circumstances. So like the idea of like, you know, raiding those tombs being cursed is kind of there, kind of not. Part of the legends for like mummies being dangerous within the region more come from, yeah, they set death traps in the tomb, so you shouldn't go into those if you stumble across one, because you're likely to die. More so than it is like you'll be cursed from it.
And a lot of that comes from just the simple fact of, yeah, you go in and raiding in a very pretty, but effectively a grave, and then touching a corpse. That's not going to be very sanitary.
Exactly. So I don't know, like that. There's definitely a lot to unpack there about the westernization of another culture for the purpose of spookies.
It's almost closer to, so rather than like Dracula or Frankenstein, the Mummy is closer to like just a slightly older, because obviously it's before the time of the internet, but like almost like a precursor to like cryptids. Because
Yeah,
it's something where, like in the same kind of vibe of, oh, this isn't from like text or some bits, but not really from like the general perception. This is from people having unnatural experiences in real life and then adding a myth to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just interesting how it kind of like comes up, because the Wolfman, again, there's no like one source for the werewolf story like there is with Dracula and Frankenstein, but there are like actual legends of werewolves. The Mummy, again, not so much. It's like just a lot of little piecemeal things that people who really don't know anything about the culture from which it's coming from are kind of mythologizing and kind of creating a mythology. So the Mummy is interesting because almost all of its tricks and stuff as a monster come from film and later adaptations of the idea of an Egyptian monster, you know? And again, that's similar to the black creature from the Black Lagoon as well, where there's no like one story, but there is like that idea of, oh, there's something in the water, something unnatural that's part man. I guess you could do a really good creature from the Black Lagoon movie and also make it like an H.P. Lovecraft thing. Someone write that down.
It looked like something no one had ever seen from this planet before.
Yeah. So I don't know. There's just a lot going on there with the way that people kind of just create the myth out of just like kind of perpetuating ignorance.
And I mean, I think the basic difference there is just time, right? Because when you boil it down to, that's every myth. It's just what we consider legends of zombies and vampires and all of that. Like, obviously, vampires were more a thing, but there were like creatures that suck the blood of people were like seen as like a theme kind of thing, or the undead in general. And maybe I should specify. They're just the same things, except they didn't make movies. They just told stories to everyone, and then over the course of time, they became myths and legends. The Mummy is that, except we live in a society and a time now where we had the skills to make them into media, rather than just strictly word of mouth scary stories. So they are almost like the more modern myth, but in the sense of the evolved telling of it, accepting that this is wholly a fictional creation, and therefore getting to have more fun with that, I should say. I think that's been done better for the benefit of someone like, say, Frankenstein, whereas The Mummy kind of, it always wants to pretend that it's linked to the actual Egyptian myths, which is what always kind of throws me, because those are all really interesting. You can draw some interesting horror from that, but they themselves never had anything to do with a mummy. That's a Western creation. So it really feels like it's being attached forcibly onto more interesting ideas to make it work.
Yeah, I think you're definitely onto something there. And I mean, Anubis just being a monster. I mean, it's a cool design. It's a dog-headed dude, right? Like that'd be fun to play with visually on screen. That could be cool. Or just a movie that's actually about the Egyptian gods, and maybe we actually cast not white people to play them. And like that's the other thing in the portrayal of the mummy on film. They always whitewash it. I guess I don't know what the background of the actress that played her in the most recent one with Tom Cruise is, but at the end of that movie, Tom Cruise becomes the mummy, which is weird.
Yeesh.
Yeah, it's again Tom.
I knew
Cruise
he did his own stunts, but
yeah, Tom Cruise came in and completely rewrote that movie. Like, you remember how Ed Norton got fired from the MCU because he wanted to make the Avengers just a Hulk movie, and they were like, yeah, no, we're not doing that. Yeah, Tom Cruise got signed on to the Dark Multiverse, and he's like, yeah, we're gonna make the Mummy 100% about me. Yeah, well, you're the main character in the first film the monster's appearing in. No, but I want to become the monster. What? and then, unlike Marvel, they didn't have the sense to tell him, no, we're not doing that. So, like, but the role's always, not just the role, but like the entire series has been like pretty whitewashed and just blatantly offensive ways. Even the 99 film, I was rewatching that on Halloween, just for shits and grins, and like, you got the character of Benny, who I remember always like giggling at as a kid because he's the silly one, but he's also an asshole, and he talks like this, and he's a sniveling coward, and he wears a fez, and he kind of kicks around in the Egyptology world, and seems to know a lot. And he's played by a white guy. It's just a little like, this is 99. It's a little late for this. And then, of course, the mummy himself in those movies is played by a guy who's South African, but from Dutch descent. So it's like, it's maybe not great. Oh, okay. It looks like the girl that plays her in the latest movie. I think she's Arabic, or she's got some kind of Middle Eastern descent from the looks of what I'm finding on her, just from a quick Wikipedia.
That's something bad. It's still replaced by Tom Cruise though, so just reinforces your point.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't know. It's weird that of course Boris Karloff played the mummy, and like, I mean, to be fair, it was in the 30s. But yeah, it begins to like, so I think it's also got that history. To their credit, like Frankenstein, the Wolfman, Dracula, they're all set in like European countries, so they don't really have to deal with unpacking that. I mean, the Wolfman's got Romani, and they just call them gypsies and stuff, so it's like, well, that's a little. It's certainly just as problematic, but it's, I don't know, in some way it's somewhat more forgivable because it hasn't completely 100% affected the way people think about it for, centuries to come. Whereas the idea like, oh yeah, the Egyptians were black is like just mind-blowing to people. Because of films like The Mummy, from Karloff on. I think they were talking about making like a kind of a Game of Thrones of ancient Egypt, and they were actually looking to hire the kid that played Joffrey in Game of thrones for one of the roles. And I'm just like, what are you doing in my swamp?
Gotta make that book. Gotta make that book. And whitewashing, oh, that's sadly not gonna backfire whatsoever. Who cares, right? We need
Yeah.
names. We need stars. We're not gonna make stars and diversify the media. We want it to be the same stars.
Yep, yep. And again, fair warning, people. History Month's where we get all political on your asses. So yeah, like but again, I guess it's not to be surprising because we're already taking, we're already like appropriating another culture to create a monster because foreign is scary. And so I guess it makes sense that we're whitewashing along the way. What can you do? That's just how Hollywood works because it just becomes its own circle. It becomes so self-focused and just perpetuates itself in that way.
Which I think maybe was when we're talking about the design and just the general history of the mummy. That aspect I do think is something that has hurt it because having that different nationality, that different ethnicity, it friggin' like diversifies the design a bit more. Like just go from the fact of actually representing the culture you're stealing from. The fact that when you line them up, the mummy does have such different attire because Frankenstein's got like rags and stuff, but it's still very clearly like European. Dracula's always dressed very smartly and stuff. The Wolfman is just fur, so there's not even a thing to that, and like other things like that, but they're all normally the human forms are all very similar looking. Dracula's maybe got more European features to him than just say if he was just purely English or anything, but because he's got the Transylvanian thing, but all of that is still very much we're looking at a whole bunch of white people, different shades of stuff. Having that extra thing of like, well, here's the black monster is something that's just like, oh, hey, that's interesting. I've never seen that before. What does that bring with it? Like design-wise, visually-wise, like it's more engaging to an audience, I feel like, because it also comes hand in hand with the mummy. Not only do you get that thing for the monster, but one of the things I will give the monster its credit is you get a very unique and very interesting location whenever you do it. Mm-hmm. So long as you don't do the cop-out of bringing the sarcophagus over to where the Western audience is, because then what's the point if you're not going to go to Egypt with a mummy story?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely the advantage of the first two films. And I guess they tried to kind of make it work a little bit in 2017, because again, turning all of London's glass into sand was kind of a cool move. But yeah, you're definitely right. It is a much more interesting locale. And yeah, there's just, I don't know, there's people ran out of ideas, I guess, question mark.
There's your summation of every single topic that could be thrown onto any Geeky Gentleman episode. I don't know, they ran out of ideas, question mark.
Like, I guess, I mean, because in the 99 film, they fight in a tomb, and in the sequel to it, it's got like a globe-trotting adventure nature to it, because they got to get to this jungle tomb that's kind of hidden away, but in the end they're fighting in a tomb. And then so 2017 not wanting to be just like the 99 film, but not wanting to be compared to it too heavily, ends up just kind of going to modern day cities and it's like, oh, the mummy in London, and it's like, okay, I guess if you gots to. I just wish they stuck with Dracula Untold as the launching point for that franchise. It was fine. I'm the only one that liked it, but it was fine.
This is a very rare sight you'll see on YouTube, folks. Someone wishing the Dark World universe actually, well, they had a good pitching point, they had a good idea. Like, I'm very amazed you have that stance.
Did you ever see Dracula Untold?
No.
I
I
mean,
saw like the marketing for it and I was like, oh, Dracula's sympathetic. Okay, miss me with that.
Ah, it was good though. It was good. I like that movie. He ends up fighting Batman at the end. I promise you. Because like,
don't know about that one.
no, seriously, because like he does the whole thing because the Turkish Empire is demanding that he and his countrymen return to the military service, and his boy would be affected in it or some shit. And he becomes a vampire to circumvent that and fight against it and everything. And so you think, okay, well, he's gonna win clearly, but then like the Turkish general or prince or whatever that he's been fighting against the whole movie kind of figures out, oh, he's a vampire. Okay, I got this. And so like he makes him confront him in a room full of silver coins, and he can't touch silver. It's such a fucking Batman move. It was legit. I fucking loved that scene.
Anyway. Fair enough. I think maybe you should have wrote the tagline for that. Dracula Untold. He fights Batman at the end, sort of, kinda. Would have sold a lot more tickets. And also, The Mummy. Don't worry, it's pretty slow, but then she turns like this glass of London into sand. It's pretty dope.
It is pretty dope. I'm not gonna lie, because you know how glass is made, so it's cool. There are cool ideas. I don't know if Johnny Depp would have made a very good Invisible Man, though. I don't know. Dark Multiverse would have been cool. The Mummy's a problematic-ass character with a problematic-ass history, and yeah, that's pretty much all I got. I do think I made a pretty good argument that they're not just zombies, at least when handled in the way I like. So I'm gonna just stick to that one and send off.
I mean, that's fair enough then. I'm glad talking about it more and the potential of the lore it brings, and again, it's very unique compared to a lot of like the holy group or the unholy group of the Universal monsters. It does have the more unique spin you can do to it. I think you could do an entire versus debate on what's the best location. The pyramid of a mummy or Dracula's castle. Like, that's a whole thing right there.
Ah, yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah. Alrighty. Alfie, who are we gonna be talking about next time?
Alright, so I've got 2 questions for you on that one, because okay. I'm just slightly unsure about the rules. So, like, does it have to be set in... the character we're talking about can't come from a historical time period from, like, a different universe, right?
The basic rules I have are they need to come from a, hold on, let me rephrase this. They need to be at least 100 years old or consistently set in an actual historical period.
Oh, okay, that's the second one then. Alright, so we're going to be talking about the Monkey King, Sun Wukong.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I know nothing about him, so you will carry this conversation for us. It'll be fantastic.
Do some research beforehand, but I think it's fitting because, hey, we're talking about what he inspired a lot on the other channel, so I think about time he got some shine on Geeky Gentleman himself.
Yeah, sure, that's fine. I don't mind. I'll fucking talk about anything. I'm just saying I don't know shit, so I'll do all the internet research I can. I feel like I'm just gonna get a bunch of Goku videos and then I'll fall down a Dragon Ball pit, but we'll see. Anyway. Alright, how do I close this? Thank you ever so much for attending our lecture on The Mummy. Until next time, I'm the philosopher.
What? I've been a bloody geek for fun, lads. And don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and buy one extra because we're having a lot of great content and rip-snorting, bollocking adventures await.
God, please never do that again. And we are your Geeky Gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.